Now that autumn is in full swing and I'm finally back to sock knitting, there is nothing that excites me more than rustic looking socks that remind me of wilting cottage gardens, fall colored trees, and misty mornings. Hi, hello, and a warm welcome to Knit in the City. I am Rebecca, and the city is an aspiration. I am here today to show you and talk about 15 pairs of rustic socks, which is highly subjective in this case. So I picked the socks that I found rustic looking, whether it's the pattern or it's the yarn or it's just the general feel of the sock. And having been away from sock knitting for several years, I found a lot of patterns that I fell in love with. So this is going to be a two-part series, and in this first part I have two categories. The first one is simple socks, like easy to knit, beginner friendly sock patterns. And the second one is textured socks. And in this category there is a little bit of lace as well. And in the second part I am going to talk about colorwork socks. Gauge is given over 10 centimeters in stockinette stitch unless I say otherwise. And now to the patterns. As I said, the first category is simple socks. And in this category I have put all the easy to make, simple silhouette socks that are suitable for beginner sock knitters. And the first pattern is the 80s Retro by Belen Fernandez. And this is an easy to knit sporty sock, knit from the toe up with a German short row heel. It has contrast color stripes on the cuff and a contrasting heel. It is knitted a 2-1 rib that goes all the way down the foot for a good fit. The sock comes in 3 adult sizes from S to L. It's knit in a fingering weight yarn on 2.25 millimeter or US 1 needles for a gauge of 32 stitches. The next pattern is the Indulgence Socks by Switches. I don't know. Sorry. And this is a super cozy, somewhat thicker sock, knit holding 2 strands of yarn together. I love the halo that the mohair gives this indoor sock. This has a cuff down construction with a wide 2-2 rib at the cuff and a yarn over short row heel. It comes in 4 adult sizes and it is knit in a fingering held with a lace on 2.5 and 3 millimeter, which is a US 1.5 and 2.5 needles. And the gauge for this sock is 30 stitches. The next pattern is the Nest Socks by Katie Herod. This is another pair of cozy socks knit in a thicker yarn with an all-over ribbed texture and a long slouchy leg. For a more shoe-friendly version, there is also instructions for a fingering weight version. Both a cuff down and a toe up version is included in this pattern. The heel is a shadow wrap heel, and the sock leg is knit in half fisherman's rib, and then the rest of the foot is knit in a 1-1 rib. The sock comes in 5 sizes, extra small to extra large. It's knit in either a fingering or a DK weight yarn, like I mentioned, on a 2.25 and 2.75 for the fingering weight version, and a 3.5 and a 3.75 in the DK weight version. And the gauge is 32 stitches for the fingering weight and 24 stitches for the DK weight one. The next pair is the Oak Socks by Vera Välimäki. And this is another pair of sporty socks with stripes. I don't know why I like those so much. But this time it also has stripes on the foot of the sock. These beginner-friendly socks are knit cuff down and has a heel flap and gusset, where the heel flap is knit in garter stitch for a fresh look. They come in 3 adult sizes and it's knit in a 3-1 rib with the cuff in a 1-1 rib. They're knit in a fingering weight yarn on 2 and 2.5 millimeter needles, which is a US 0 and 1.5 for a gauge of 34 stitches. The next sock pattern, and the last one in this category, is the Book Nook socks by This Handmade Life. And she has made a lot of really pretty rustic looking patterns. So if you want to dive deeper, I can recommend. These have the perfect rustic fall cottage look, I think. The pattern includes different ribbing options and even a variation with a simple cable. I like how these socks don't have a separate ribbing for the cuff. They have a garter stitch heel and sole, which gives the sock an extra rustic look, I think. It comes in 2 sizes, M and L, and it is knit in a fingering weight yarn on 2.25 or US 1 needle for a gauge of 36 stitches for this one. So the next and last category is textured socks. These incorporate simple textured patterns like broken rib, cables, twisted stitches, and even some embroidery. The first pair is the Canyon socks by Carly Perrins. The first pair in this category is based on a tutu rib, and it incorporates an easy lace pattern. They're knit cuff down with a heel flap and gusset, and this sock comes in 4 sizes, S to XL. They're knit in a fingering weight yarn on 2.5 or US 1.5 needles for a gauge of 34 stitches. The next ones are the Ribbit socks by Celine Phaeton. This pair also has a ribbed pattern, but this time it is broken rib. I really like the detail where there is a pearl round after the cuff and before the toe begins. This sock has a very special heel construction called a kite heel that I'm excited to try. The sock comes in 8 sizes and it can be knit in different yarn weights from fingering to a light worsted. The fingering weight version, which is the numbers that are given in the pattern specs, they're knit on 2.25 millimeter or US 1 needles for a gauge of 34 stitches. The next ones are the Piku socks by Dorota Makiewicz. These socks have a beautiful textured pattern made with twisted stitches. They're knit cuff down and they also have a special kind of heel construction. I don't know the name of this heel, but it uses short rows. The sock comes in 3 sizes, S to L. It's knit in a light fingering weight yarn on 2.5 millimeters or 1.5 US needles for a gauge of 38 stitches in the twisted rib pattern. The next one is the Gro socks by Fiber Tales, and she also has a lot of very pretty rustic looking patterns, not just socks, but all over this cottage kind of feel. These socks are using the same patterns as the Gro hat that I have talked about in a previous episode. The sock comes in 4 sizes, extra small to large. It is knit cuff down with a heel flap and gusset. The yarn is a fingering weight and the sock is knit on 2.25 or US 1 needles for a gauge of 30 stitches. The next pair is called the Nutmeg socks by Tanya Barley. These socks have an all-over textured pattern that at first glance looks like cables, but it's not. They are knit cuff down and they have a heel flap and a gusset. They come in 3 sizes, S to L, and are knit in a fingering weight yarn on 2 millimeter or US 0 needles. The gauge is 34 stitches. The next pair is the Agrimonia socks by Marie-Eve Wedge. These socks have a dainty floral motif running down the foot and a decorative edge on the cuff. They are knit toe up and they have a short row heel. There are instructions for both a regular and a high instep. They come in 6 sizes, are knit in a fingering weight yarn on 2 and 2.25 millimeter or US 1 and 0 needles for a gauge of 37 stitches. The next one is the Citrine socks by VertKnit. These cozy looking socks are knit in a rib and cable pattern. They're knit cuff down with a short row heel. The socks come in 8 adult sizes. They're knit in a fingering weight yarn on 2 and 2.5 millimeter or US 0 and 1.5 needles for a gauge of 36 stitches. The next one is Eine by Melody Hoffman, and I love the rustic look of these socks. The little posies at the cuff are just so cute. They're made using both knitting and embroidery, and the pattern includes a video tutorial for this technique. The socks come in 2 sizes, a woman's M and L, and they're knit in a fingering weight yarn on 2.25 or US1 needles for a gauge of 17 stitches, which I find kind of strange, but I don't know. It just seems like a big gauge for those needles and that yarn. And the last pair of socks is the Vår socks by Fiber Tales. These socks have the cutest little flower embroidery on the cuff. And the name Vår means spring in Danish and also in Swedish. Actually, you just pronounce it a bit differently. The pattern has instructions for a normal or a short leg. The shorty sock has a narrower band of the flower motif on the cuff. The socks are knit cuff down and they have a heel flap and gusset. And they come in 4 sizes, XS to L. And they are knit in a fingering weight yarn on 2.25 or US1 needles. Those are useful if you want to knit these patterns. I think that size needle came up a lot. And you want to hit a gauge of 30 stitches. And that is actually all I have for today. I think I could have actually crammed the rest of the 17 patterns in here, but I don't know how enjoyable that would have been. So stay tuned for part 2 with all the colorwork socks. And with that episode, I have 2 categories. Both are colorwork, but one category is a bit easier because that is the colorwork socks that only have colorwork on the cuff or the leg. And the other category is more of an all-over colorwork sock. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I wish you a lovely day and I see you in the next episode. Bye bye!